Well, and you decide tonight a big week for South Carolina. Tomorrow, presidential candidate Ron DeSantis will be in Columbia to unveil a new military policy plan. The Florida governor says if he's elected president, he will remove any social agenda from the U.S. military. He added he wants to, quote, rip all the Obama-Biden nonsense out of the military. And on Thursday, his opponent, Nikki Haley, will be in Greenville. She'll be holding a town hall event downtown. That's to begin at 6:30. And all this comes with the Iowa caucus just 6 months away for Republicans. And South Carolina is the first in the nation primary for Democrats, which is set for early February. And as the left and right continue to make a push for South Carolina, there is now a group forming to make a push for the middle. So for much more, we now bring in former South Carolina governor candidate and former Congressman Joe Cunningham. So Mr. Cunningham, good to see you again. Last time we saw you, you're running for governor here in South Carolina. But now you're in New Hampshire tonight, and it seems like you've been busy with something that's not even really tied to the Democratic Party. So this no labels situation right now, you seem to have the Democrats a bit worried about this push that you're making. So first off, what is this no labels party that you are now pushing for there in New Hampshire this evening?
Well, great to see you. No labels, it's not a party. So when I was in Congress, I worked with the Problem Solvers Caucus, which was half Democrats, half Republicans. You know, moderate members who just want to get things done and put country over party. That caucus, the Problem Solvers Caucus, was founded by No Labels. No Labels is a C4, it's a nonprofit that's been around for over 12 years. And so in my work with them, I was able to get two of my bills through a divided Congress and signed into law by President Trump. Now, years ago, they expanded their vision there and made that bicameral, meaning they had a House Problem Solvers Caucus and they had an arm over in the Senate. And so that was really great because you get both chambers, you know, talking to one another, which is pretty rare in Washington, D.C. It's pretty rare that you have Democrats and Republicans sitting around a table talking about the problems and the solutions. As of late, No Labels has been working to get ballot access across the entire country in all 50 states plus Washington, D.C. for what's called a unity ticket. It would be a Democrat or Republican and Democrat. Now, this is just an insurance policy. No Labels has not made the decision whether or not to run a ticket or not. That's going to depend upon a couple of different things. Number one, whether or not the two major nominees are so undesirable in the minds and the eyes of America. Number two, there has to be a pathway to victory that exists for a bipartisan ticket for president and vice president. And from our polling and our modeling, it shows that there is that pathway under a Trump versus Biden rematch. And as we know, we've seen the news and the numbers, that's a rematch that 2/3 of the country doesn't want to see.
I think a lot of that polling even showed as little as 5% wants to see a Biden-Trump rematch. I wanted to go and ask you about that ticket that you mentioned. You said it's both Republican and Democrat. It seems like Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia and former governor from Utah, John Huntsman, will be that ticket. Is that the situation? Are those the two who will be on that ticket?
Well, No Labels just released their policy book, Common Sense. And we're here in New Hampshire to kick off this conversation with America to talk about how to bring Democrats and Republicans together and how the fact is that most Americans are somewhere near the middle and we can agree on a lot of the issues, even when Washington, D.C. seems to disagree. Now, Governor Huntsman and Senator Manchin were two of the original co-chairs for No Labels. And so they're the first ones here to kick it off. But look, we're going to take this conversation across the entire country to different towns. We'll be having more and more guests come out. And again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, No Labels has not even decided whether or not they're going to nominate a ticket, more or less who would be on it. So to speculate as to any names would be just that.
Okay, and I had read an op-ed that you wrote back in May, and you had mentioned the percentage of independents. It's about 44% compared to 25% Republican, 27% Democrat. That's a Gallup poll there. But I was surprised to see that you were pretty critical of the Democratic Party. And you had written, the National Democratic Party assumes foolishly that all moderates will automatically side with Biden over Trump, even though Democrats have done nothing to court these moderates. Where has the Democratic Party fallen short to court these moderates, according to you?
Well, look, I think when you look at the polls and you look at Biden's numbers, there's obviously an issue there. And President Biden has had some successes, and I'll give him credit for that. But having said that, you look at the numbers and the percentage of Americans that want to see Biden to run, that they want to see Trump to run. It's very, very low. And so the question becomes, for those over 2/3 of Americans who don't want to see this rematch, the 70% don't want to see Biden run, or 60% don't want to see Trump running. Who's speaking to them? So we're trying to bring people together, Democrats and Republicans, in this common sense book, which is online at nolabels.org/common sense, gives an idea as to where the most of America is. And this is driven by polling and data, and it shows that on issues from immigration to crime to gun safety, that there's a lot of common ground which we can build upon. And, I've spent my career trying to bring people together. I've always put country ahead of party. And so this is nothing out of the ordinary for me.
So you famously said, sit down, have a beer together. Really, final question.
Right.
Some Democrats, the biggest criticism that you've been facing with No Labels is that it seems like the Democratic Party is concerned. They're saying that you're going to pull votes away from Biden, not necessarily Trump, and it's going to lead to another presidency for the former President Donald Trump. What's your response to Democrats who say, you shouldn't be doing this, not at this time?
Well, look, I mean, those are lofty allegations. You have to have some evidence and some proof. And the fact is, we haven't even decided whether or not to nominate a ticket, more or less the names of which would be on that ticket. And so I think you'd have to take into consideration who would be on that ticket and what that ticket would look like before you can make an allegation that would draw from one party or another. There's not really a good comparison as to a third party besides maybe Ross Perot, which drew evenly from Democrat and Republican and resulted in the election of Bill Clinton. So any comparison to a Ralph Nader or Jill Stein, that's just not simply the case, because what the path that we're trying to carve out here is that the path in the middle where most of Americans are, that is comprised of people who feel like they're not heard, and rightfully so. And so we're trying to give them a voice, the common sense majority, and give them a place to stand. That's what this is about. And again, this is about democracy. We have a right to access the ballot and get on the ballot. There are no crowns in our democracy. The president, vice president doesn't belong to a particular party. There's nothing in our Constitution about parties. This is about doing what's right for America. This is about doing what's right for the people who feel disengaged, and it's leading to apathy in our politics and our government. And a lot of people feel disengaged and they don't care because they feel like nobody's listening to them. And No Labels is stepping up and filling that void.
All right, 2024 already seems pretty interesting. Looks like No Labels could make it even more interesting. So, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.